All right, welcome to episode 4 of the Practice Squad podcast. I'm John Vocal,
I'm Mark Petrito.
and we took about a month off here, so I'm just really excited because training camp started. There's been a few noteworthy headline events that have happened in the past few weeks, and fantasy football is heating up as well. So there's definitely no shortage of things to talk about for this episode. One thing that I think we need to get out of the way really quickly is it seems like this Lions bet became America's favorite bet over the past 3 weeks, even though we thought we were doing something original at first, making this the pinnacle podcast bet.
Quite literally became the favorite bet of America. I think in July, I saw something in July. The top bet in Caesar Sportsbook was Detroit Lions over 6.5 total wins, which is coincidentally the bet that John and I made before that article came out a few weeks ago. I just want to remind everybody that if John loses that bet and they don't win over 6.5 games, I got a couple jerseys ready to go. I gave him the choice of white and maroon. So you can pick. I just wanted that to be clear. They're waiting for them, and they're not washed, so they smell.
Oh, that's rough.
Didn't ever want to wash them after my last wear, so
yeah, that's fair. You got to keep the memories there, and a smell actually triggers your memory really
it does.
well.
I mean, it smells really good sitting next to me right here.
Right. I have not picked which jersey I would like you to wear when you inevitably lose this bet, because I need to make sure that it's more cringe than what you're, putting me through. Especially practice squad player Mark Petrito. I mean, that's a pretty rough jersey to have to don to the ACT. So,
no, you don't want to rep this thing. You don't want to be wearing this thing.
So, and one point of clarification, and I do have the receipt on this. The actual bet was 5 wins, I lose. 6 wins is a tie.
Yep.
7 wins, Mark loses, right? So
Correct.
We'll probably figure out some like dual punishment if it's 6, but I do want to say 6 I'm really content with. 6.5 kind of scares me a little bit, I'll admit. But Mark did agree to that bet, and I am not going to tilt it, in Mark's favor any more than it already currently is. So
and well, let's just say this. Remember, America is choosing to ride with you, as it seems, based on the betting trends. So I like to be the underdog.
I'm a leader just naturally, so
it's me against John and the rest of the country, I guess. But
I let everybody know what my pick was last episode, and America followed. So,
and for the record, just to clarify, I will be thrilled if the Lions win more than 6 games.
Yeah,
I'll just really hate my life taking the ACT and whatever jersey you pick. But after that, I'll be like thrilled.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I think it's what Detroit deserves. Detroit sports have been just absolutely dismal for the past decade on all 4 sports teams, which all had their flashes of greatness over the years, but all of them are, in perpetual rebuild phases. So hopefully that's different in the future. Again, I think the city of Detroit deserves it. Very passionate fan base, but we'll see what happens. So moving on to big contracts, right? Because a few big things happened actually within the last week. So we're not even too late to this. Kyler Murray's contract, which doesn't have the most guaranteed money in NFL history, but it does make him the highest paid quarterback by what, $500,000?
It's close, yeah.
Yeah, it's petty, right? You just have to beat Watson.
The names around. I mean, the names, and we can debate this too. And I've been debating with people the last week. The names surrounding that contract. I mean, you're looking at Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. Names Josh Allen, names like that. I don't know if he's in that conversation, but quarterbacks are hard to come by, and when you have one as talented as that, you have to keep them. I mean, they're just hard to find guys like that. So,
yeah, I think the question of who's better is a really hard one to answer in the quarterback situation, because there might be better guys, but are you going to be able to get them? Are you going to be able to pay them?
Exactly. You have to. I mean, you have your guy. You think he has the potential to do it. You got to give him a chance, right? You got to pay him to keep him there, to keep him happy. That's just kind of what we're seeing as a trend in the league. We're gonna see if he's worth it or not, right? But I kind of agree with the Cardinals that you had to do it.
Definitely. And the talk of the town obviously is this film study, 4
Yeah,
hours a week.
which I think is being blown up for no reason. You can say what you think about it, and then I'll say my point if you want, John.
I just think it's like, why would you put it in there in the first place? Especially if, like, that as soon as somebody reads that, and that's the first time that's ever been put in a quarterback contract, that somebody's going to take it and run with it. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when they signed it, they probably just were like, "No one's ever gonna talk about this or really care," you know? Kyler is probably like, "Sure, put it in there, that's not a problem." I mean, I study film like, Kyler's a smart player, like, he's not lazy, he's not there's never been any sort of, published thing, saying that he's in any way not studying or not trying or not caring enough about the team or getting better, so he probably just saw that and was like, "Yeah, no brainer, put it in there, I don't care," And then
Yeah.
it
It's
got blown
it's
up
tough
and
because, like, now people are bringing the character, stuff into the conversation, which,
it's
the only thing that I'll say in reference to that was just, like, the way he demanded a contract by, like, doing the whole dramatic, like, unfollowing everybody on social media and then having your agent put out a statement that had multiple typos in it, which I thought was very funny.
yeah.
It's just like, if you go about it like that, and then the organization says, okay, you're doing this film study, it's like, okay, well, maybe that whole, like, marketing ploy that you did to get the contract actually did kind of make you look a little childish in the eyes of the public, so that when
Yeah.
they see this, they're like, oh, see, that's proof, like, this dude's lazy, he wants to play video games, is what everybody's saying, which is
Yeah.
pretty
I
funny.
used to I used to think the same thing, all the drama to get your money was always unnecessary, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is their career, this is their financial this is for their future. This is for their kids, grandkids. Like you got to do what you got to do to get paid. You never know when your career is going to end. It could happen any play, especially with quarterbacks. He's earned the right to be in the conversation to get that payday, and he's not the first guy that's played hardball to get paid. So I don't hate it. I mean, you got the players. I mean, if they deserve it, they deserve it, and if they're going to play hard to get to do that, then by all means do it. I guess if the team could have made it easier as well. So
Right. And
you got to see it
on
as
that
both
note,
sides.
Debo definitely played hard to get, and he got his
Yep.
bag. So, and and I don't think anybody's really throwing too much shade at Debo. And honestly, that contract I think is perfect. 3 years long, right? So he could go and re up for a contract, equally as large, probably larger by the time he's what, 26, 27, something like that.
Yeah, he's still young.
And there's incentive structure in place for him to actually earn more money if he does choose to play that running back role, right? Which was a point of contention, player health. He was just afraid that he was going to shorten his career playing
Right.
running back, and that was going to affect his pay grade over time. And now,
Right.
hopefully you're getting an extra $1 million if you score X amount of rushing touchdowns. That kind of changes the equation
Yeah,
a
I
little bit.
love the incentives in their contracts. I think it's smart on the players' behalf for sure because it keeps you motivated. You don't get satisfied. There's always more to chase, and the team itself is not going to be mad paying you more money because chances are if you do meet the standard that they set, things are going good. So they're not going to be mad about it if they have to pay you
Yeah.
more money and you're doing what they paid you to do in the first place. Yeah, I think they'll be happy to give you your bonus. So
Absolutely. And I think Debo's an incredibly smart player, and I think that contract is structured, perfectly for him. And he obviously has the confidence to go and hit probably every single one of those incentives, maybe even earlier in the season, that any of us expect. So,
sure.
um, and it's crazy how you go from demanding a trade to being one of the highest paid receivers, and that's really all it takes. Obviously, the 49ers can't let a talent like Debo escape them. So, curious to see what that looks like with him, Kittle, Trey Lance, who's a very mobile quarterback, right? I mean, obviously he's a little bit of a question mark, being this first year that he's starting, but they got a lot of athletic talent on that team.
I'm still surprised too that they're so bought into Trey Lance. I mean, realistically, he hasn't proven anything yet in the NFL. I mean, I know he's a phenomenal talent with a lot of potential. He had a great college career. He shows early signs of being very good, but you still have Jimmy G, who he's a winner. That's what he does. I mean, his winning percentage is up there with some of the best of all time, not just best right now, like best of all time, like Brady, Montana, Manning esque. And you can argue all you want. He might not look the prettiest when he plays. He might make some terrible decisions, but he wins games. They have him on the roster, and he hasn't been traded yet. I'm curious to see what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and I mean the talk with that though is, like make no mistake about it, Trey Lance is our guy. So what
Right,
do you do
which is
with Jimmy, right? Is
crazy to
he
me to hear that.
I get it when you put so much of an investment into him, right? You can't
Yeah,
really say, never mind, this guy's not really going to work out. But you're right. At the same time, I mean, Jimmy's made some incredible deep playoff runs throughout his career. And, that type of experience, that type of consistency is something that's very hard to find in a quarterback in the NFL. So it does feel like a gamble, but at the same time, the 49ers tend to make pretty good decisions organizationally. So we'll
yeah.
see what happens, I guess.
They're clearly seeing something that we don't have the opportunity to see yet. I trust that coaching staff. I trust that organization. You saw the same thing happen with not too long ago, a guy named Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith. Everyone was questioning, like, this guy's never played. This is a second-year player. He didn't even win that many games at Texas Tech. What are you guys talking about? You're really going to give up Alex Smith for who is this kid? And we saw pretty quickly that was the right decision. So,
Right.
you
I
never
mean,
know.
even, Josh Allen, everybody was kind of like, who is this guy for the first
Right.
couple of years because he needed to develop. And, Buffalo wasn't the crazy winning franchise that we know them to be as of the past couple of years at the time. So
Yeah.
it's I think being an NFL quarterback might be the hardest position in all of sports. The type
It's
of
up there.
calculus that you have to make, the accuracy that you have to have with your throws, your decision making, you just have to be so versatile and so intelligent. And like clearly that takes a couple years of just chilling out and developing for, some of those quarterbacks that have had longevity. So I
It's
guess we'll
like,
find out.
yeah. I think that'll lead us into our last current event that we definitely want to address. That's the most recent. The Desean Watson news came out actually this morning. This episode will air obviously in a few days, but it came out this morning, Monday morning. Um, yeah, Desean Watson, 6 games. John, what do you think?
I mean, I think the consensus is it's way too short, right? And you just stack it against some of the other suspensions that have happened over the past few years, and you gotta like kind of raise an eyebrow at that. I mean, even Calvin Ridley betting on a game that he wasn't even involved with, getting a season-long suspension, right? I mean,
It doesn't paint a good picture for the NFL, and it doesn't even come down to an argument of innocence or guilt or anything like that. I mean, they've clearly done their research. They clearly know more about the situation than we do. And yeah, like you said, I mean, you compared gambling on a game that you didn't even play in and you bet on your team to win and getting a year-long suspension like Ridley did. And then not even a year later, you get the Deshaun Watson news, 6 games, and he has 20 some allegations against him, some of which have not been, settled. Um, Obviously, with news that could come out in the future that could make him guilty, um, it's not a good look for the NFL. They've done this and they continue to mess this up with suspensions. I mean, Ray Rice he got kicked out of the league forever for um, assault, and you just think, okay, well, he gets kicked out of the league forever, and Deshaun Watson is getting
it's
6 games.
24 allegations of sexual assault. I
You
mean,
know,
it's
it just
something.
doesn't make sense. There's never any. It's like they claim they look at every single case individually and every player and every incident, but it's hard to trust and respect the decision making of the punishment that the NFL chooses to do on their players because there's no consistency. You just
And the tough part is this was the case they tried to establish consistency where the NFL and the NFLPA came together and agreed
I
to hire a third party federal judge to come to this conclusion. And the conclusion she comes to is just more of the same, like inconsistent, what is going on,
I mean, it wasn't too long ago, John. Just another comparison, just to kind of show how crazy this is and why people are upset about it. Tom Brady got 4 games for Deflategate. I
Right.
mean, 4 games for maybe the pressure and the balls were a little bit, under what they were supposed to be. Like, that's crazy that
There's
Desean
players
got
that
2
have
more.
season-long suspensions for, smoking weed or something like that, right? And it's just
Josh
like,
Gordon was out of the league for years and years because he couldn't pass a drug test, but
that's right.
Deshaun Watson's gonna sit 6 games and come back to a Browns team that probably still is able to win a couple while he's out, and, I mean, they could be a playoff team, They could be a contender this year, and we could find out a year out, months after the Super Bowl or whatever that he is guilty, and it's like, wow,
Yeah.
like, it's just I don't like it. I
I was
it's just
I was
not enough.
also high on Nick Chubb having just an insane season because of that entire quarterback situation, and his projections in my book just kind of definitely went down quite a bit now. Like because I went into those projections expecting, oh yeah, like no problem, Deshaun Watson is getting suspended for the season. Like it's
Yeah,
just it felt
I
like
was
a
assuming
given.
the same thing. Um Yeah, I was assuming the same thing. I think Nick Chubb's going to get his stats and fantasy points one way or another. I mean, he's a stud. They're going to feed him the ball, but yeah, I mean, it changes a lot of things. It changes that division. It's going to shake up everything in the NFL, honestly.
That definitely. I mean, now the Browns are probably in the conversation to finish first in their division. I mean, I'd say that maybe the Ravens will give them a run for their money. Maybe the Bengals will, but they definitely have the strongest roster out of anybody in their division right now,
Yeah,
with that quarterback situation figured out. So, definitely unfortunate. I think everybody's consensus is that that was inconsistent and way too short, but guess we'll see. If the NFL chooses to appeal it, and by the NFL we essentially, mean Goodell, it sounds like Watson's party and the NFLPA will sue that appeal or that
yeah,
counter
it's
decision. So it's a whole new mess. And then if that's the case, Watson could be in a situation where he ends up playing for the entire year because the suspension ruling isn't figured out yet and the court case isn't settled there.
I know.
So no matter which way you shake this, it's all working to Deshaun's benefit, which is just absolutely
It's
crazy.
crazy. It's crazy. And I hate to assume that he is guilty. I hate to assume the worst, right? I mean, nothing has been proven yet, one way or another. But I mean, it's a lot of accusations, man, and there's a lot of evidence out there that is not in his favor. Obviously, we don't know everything. We don't know as much as the NFL does, but the decision's a decision, and we'll see what happens moving forward with it. But it's definitely shaking up the league and definitely turning some heads on whether or not that's long enough of a suspension.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, how they continue to handle drug offenses or minor crimes or things
Right.
like that going forward, right? Because if
Yeah.
somebody gets suspension for, like theft or getting into a fight or failing a drug test and it's 6 games, like people are going to be really upset. So
Right. It's people don't
it's a
forget
bad
these
look.
suspensions. Yeah, it's not a good look.
Definitely. And then I guess one other thing that we didn't really cover is DK also got his bag in a pretty similar fashion
Yep.
to Debo. Same thing, like 3-year contract around, I believe, around the same amount of money as well.
Yeah, and again, another guy that deserved it, another guy that didn't exactly play nice to get that money, right? Made a couple. He wasn't as dramatic as a Kyler Murray or Debo, but he definitely went into the office and said, "Listen, I'm not happy here. You guys got to pay me, or I want out." And they considered trading him, I think, but at the end of the day, they wanted to keep him around. I saw something funny saying it's like, of course they paid him before he had to play any snaps with Drew Lock because he's going to want to be traded after that. Which
Yeah.
Drew Lock, I actually think, is not as bad as people give him. He gets a lot of crap for being terrible, but I actually think he has some potential to be a average quarterback in the league. So
I'm honestly surprised that that's who the Seahawks are rolling with, though, because it doesn't even seem like they really attempted to get anybody better. And maybe they just think, this is a rebuild year. We're trying to get other ducks in a row right now. We're not really worried about quarterback, and we'll see what the draft looks like or, what free agency looks like next year. That's
yeah,
totally fair and respectable. Do you think Pete Carroll's going to stick around through this rebuild, or do you think that he's just maybe here to kind of help, like, get things kind of in the right spot, get some of the pipes laid for the next guy at this point?
I think he's probably going to be there through the rebuild. I mean, he's older. He's definitely probably close to considering retirement, but at the same time, he's one of the most energetic coaches you see. You know, anytime he's mic'd up, anytime the camera's on him, he's acts a lot younger than he is. So, um, I mean, I don't see him slowing down anytime soon. He doesn't look like he is. He looks like he still loves what he does. He's done a great job in Seattle his whole time there, and I could see him trying to want to turn it around. You know, he's a competitor. He always has been. I could see him trying to turn it around, see if he can help them get back on the right track.
And that'd be a pretty crazy success story too, is, moving
Yeah,
on from Wilson and still finding success. I mean, you're seeing even, Belichick is struggling with that post Brady, right? So
yeah, yeah. It's not
it's,
easy.
no, it's not. And it's definitely a huge credit to that coaching staff and that organization if they're able to pull that off, and a consistently very competitive division that is very difficult to win in.
Yeah,
Um, do we want to move on to football pool talk and fantasy talk and all of that stuff?
would love to. Would love to. As John's pulling this up, so just to kind of give a quick overview of what this is. John and I were talking about doing something to get people involved and kind of have something every week that you can look forward to. It's easier than fantasy football, honestly. You just pick a team. We're gonna definitely send out invites to a lot of our closest friends and family, and kind of just we're gonna update this throughout the season on our podcast. And so if you follow it, you'll see who's doing well, who's eliminated, stuff like that. But basically, you pick a team. If your team wins that week, you advance. Can't pick the same team twice, and it's a double elimination. So if you lose twice, your team loses twice, you're out. And if you're the last man standing, you're going to win the pot money. And we're also going to give a percentage of the proceeds to the Chad Tuff charity, which is going to be awesome, I think, to give back a little bit while doing something fun. And um, so John can kind of go over some of the details. He'll show you. He's pulled it up.
Yeah, no problem. And the main reason we settled on this is because we had like such a volume of people inquire about getting kind of a practice squad podcast fantasy league set up that there would just be no way to manage it, right? And we're
Right.
hoping that this does, like upwards of 40, 50 people would absolutely be optimal so that, the potential prize winnings are obviously significant, but on top of it, we can actually give back a pretty significant portion to charity as well. So we thought this was a happy middle ground on all those accounts, something still fantasy-esque, something for people to compete in and have fun with, but not a crazy amount of management, and we can onboard as many people as possible. So as Mark said, like, coming up on week 1 here, you just pretty much get to pick any of these teams to win. You pick a backup in the event the game is canceled, which obviously is unlikely. And then, if I pick Green Bay to win week 1 and they win, I don't get to pick them again for the rest of the season. The one exception to that is if this goes so far that there is no winner in playoffs. If that happens, then all of the playoff teams will reset. So you have all of the teams that made the playoffs to choose from, and it keeps going through the Super Bowl from there.
Right. It's like it restarts. It's like it becomes another whole new tournament with those who are still alive.
Correct.
But now with just playoff teams. So if you pick a first round playoff team and they win, you can't pick that team again.
Yep, exact same concept. You just get some teams back. And yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing, it's double elimination, which I think Mark mentioned. So it should be pretty fun, should be pretty easy for people to pick up. And yeah, we're really looking forward to it. We'll figure out the best, most efficient way to distribute this link. But both of us are relatively accessible on social media. So, if you're having trouble or you would like to get involved and want that link, just go ahead and hit us up. So on that note, Mark, I do believe you're actually playing regular fantasy football this year as well. I know for sure I'm going to be in at least 2 leagues, potentially 3. Is that situation looking the same for you?
Yeah, last year. So I like to do one league because I just like to just lock in. I don't like to have to worry about. I hate when there's crossfire, right? Like when I'm playing against McCaffrey in one league and I have McCaffrey on my team in another. I hate that. So I like to do one league. I have a league at work that I'm in. I think that might be the only one I'm going to do, and there may be one other one I'm on the fence about. But I do enjoy doing it. I'm excited to do it again. I think I've done it the last 10 years of my life. Probably I've been doing fantasy every year, it's definitely a lot to keep track of, but it's fun. It's really fun to manage those.
Was your first year of fantasy football the year that we got a league going together? Because I remember, like, I think it was seventh grade, we had an 8-man league that I won, and I have not won a fantasy football league since that
No,
year.
I did a league. That was the first league I've hosted, and that you and I kind of both ran that for a few years. I did a league, I think 2 years before that, and that's kind of where I got introduced to it and really started to enjoy it. And then when we started our own, obviously I took it more and more serious as I got older, and enjoyed doing it more and more.
Oh yeah, you would be the only guy that, because we did our best to do in-person fantasy drafts because it was a good excuse to get a lot of our football teammates together and just hang out for a few hours. And
Yeah.
Mark would generally be the only person. He'd show up with a magazine and a notebook with a bunch of notes in it with all of his sleepers. And and this is like 14 or 15 years old, and Mark was definitely way more serious about it than the rest of us.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is I've never won. So
And that's how
it's a little
fantasy
more luck
football.
than you think. But I'll tell you
It
this, I
really
always
is.
compete. I'm always in like the top 4 or 5. I've never finished, towards the bottom. I'm always up there. I just can't win it. But I'll say this, I also don't like to look at like the popular rankings. I sit down and I look at the numbers, I look at the schedules and stuff. I do my own rankings. And that's why I would bring my notebook. I'd have my own, I'd cross them off as they get selected. But I don't like looking at ESPN.com or, all these analysts and stuff because there's a lot of unpredictable things, and I just kind of like to do my own thing with it.
I completely agree. And I also think that, like, a huge part of it that, gauges all those ESPN metrics are, one, last season performance, and then two, like, just how high they are on the player from like an athletic and talent standpoint. But
Yeah.
there's so many things that go into racking up fantasy points that aren't based on how good of a player you are, right? It's the role that you fit, where you actually play on the fields, like the type of routes that you're running, all of that stuff. Because, if you're a short route inside guy, it's only picking up like a couple yards here and there, but it's a PPR league and he
That
has
adds up.
8 or
Yeah.
9 receptions. That adds up very quickly. Exactly.
Yeah, the structure of your league definitely is important, right? How many running backs, how many receivers? Do you have a flex position? Do you do one quarterback, two quarterbacks? Do you do PPR? Like all that stuff obviously affects how you draft and how you set your lineup. But um, I love it, man. It's always a good time. It's always a good excuse to hang out with friends and talk trash and just enjoy. It gives you another reason to watch football as if we needed one.
Right. Absolutely. So do you have any, like, bigger sleepers that you're kind of have your eye on for this year's draft? And, is it rookie based? Is it just where they fit in the organization? Any of these guys?
Yes. Yeah, so the main thing I look at is definitely role within their position on the team, right? One thing I like to look at is matchups, right? Like what division are they in? Who are they going to play a lot? Whether all those like small factors that add up to actually matter, like it does matter in the long run, because every game is going to have an effect on your, ranking in the league. If you lose one week because you had a guy play in a rainy or windy or snow weather, that matters. So I look at quarterback first, John, and see if you can agree or disagree with me. Honestly, my sleeper there, and you can say it's not a sleeper, but I kind of think it is. He's a mid-tier guy. Is Kirk Cousins. Uh, Talent-wise, I think he's top 15 maybe. I mean, he's right about on the halfway point in the league. But what I see there is he's in a division that has a couple bad teams, and when they play the Packers, they're going to probably have to throw to come back or to compete with them. So I see him putting up really big numbers. He's got two of the best receivers in the league. He's got a couple of good tight ends. They have a running game with play action. He's got a new coach. You mentioned in our last episode, the Zimmer era is done. There was a lot of issues, I think, between him and Zimmer. Not a great relationship. I think he has a better relationship with this coach. I think Kirk Cousins could have a really big time year for fantasy.
Yeah, and I think Justin Jefferson's obviously a top wide receiver fantasy pick. I've had him in my league past 2 years, and he has been absolutely phenomenal for me. And it makes perfect sense to draft the arm behind all of those Justin
Yeah,
Jefferson receptions.
I
So
mean, he has the weapons. Their defense isn't great, so you think of and this is just I'm kind of going through my thought process. Like their defense isn't great, so they're probably going to be in a lot of shootouts, right? Like that's kind of how I think when I look to who do I want to play each week. Is this going to be a shootout game, high scoring? Are they going to have to come from behind? Stuff like that. And Kirk Cousins is just a kind of a perfect fit for that. I know he wasn't great last year in fantasy. He's had good years. He's had bad years. I think he's a good fit. He's definitely a guy I have on my radar
no, I
for
definitely agree with you.
quarterback.
Remaining in the NFC North, how do you feel about Amon-Ra, Sun God, St. Brown as a pretty high, round draft pick as a receiver? You think he's consistent enough to kind of put up some of those big numbers?
I think a lot of guys have him. I think he's going to get drafted in the top 4 rounds in most leagues, depending on if you're a 10 or 12 man league. But I don't think he's going to put up the numbers that we saw last year. I think he's not bad by any means. I think he'll be a good receiver to have on your roster. But some guys are going to take him higher than they probably should this year, just because of the potential that he started to show at the end of last year. But you got to remember the Lions were playing in some trash games. A lot of those games were meaningless to the teams they were playing against. It was meaningless for the Lions. They were just kind of playing to see if they still have heart. And so they were throwing a lot. They were trying things they would never normally do in games that matter. And if everybody's predictions are right, the Lions should be competing in games this season that are going to matter towards the end of the year. And I don't know if he puts up the same numbers in those games that matter, where they see better defenses towards the end of the year. I'm not sure. I think he's going to be okay. He's definitely a safe pick. He's not going to be a bust by any means. I just don't know if it's going to be as high as people think this year for him.
And it's worth noting too that receiving room has gotten a lot more talented.
Right. There's
over
other
this
weapons. He
offseason,
was
too.
literally the only guy they were throwing to. I mean, they were putting him on, and Swift was out, and a lot of guys are high on him in fantasy and have him as a sleeper at running back. But if Swift is healthy, he's not going to. St. Brown's not going to get those out of the backfield plays that he was getting, which are just easy PPR catch and then get 10, 15 yards, make a guy miss, and all of a sudden it's a big play. Like that's where he was getting his points last year, was just like little dink stuff like that. And that's what Swift is going to take over if he's healthy. So you got to take that into account as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So some guys that are already in the league that we kind of have some past performance to judge, and then taking a look at rookies, right? Like this is really where it's free reign. You don't know how these guys are used. You don't know how they fit in the organization, but obviously, like some of these first, second round guys have big play potential and can have some pretty serious impact on offense right away.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the last few years, we've seen rookies make an impact right away. Not all of them, and it's always a risk to draft a rookie because you just don't know what their role is going to be. You don't know if their game is going to translate to the NFL. We've seen Justin Jefferson had a really good rookie year, right? He was a steal if he got him that year. Jamar Chase did the same thing the following year. You have Najee Harris in Pittsburgh as a rookie, did very well, right? So you look at stuff like that. You look at this year's rookies. I'm not really sure if there's going to be anybody that stands out like those three guys, but there's some young receivers that have veteran quarterbacks that I think can make a step up and put up some numbers. I think Garrett Wilson's going to do that. I think he's going to be one of the top targets there. I think he has a chance to, he's pro ready. He's an Ohio State product. Those guys are typically prepared for the pros. They have a history of doing well early on in the NFL. But other than that, I mean, maybe Olave in New Orleans, another Ohio State guy.
Right.
I don't know how fast. I don't know how fast the Lions receiver is going to get back. Williams had tore his ACL.
Yeah.
I don't know how fast he's going to get back, but he could be a guy again that you'd pick up late in the season. And I mean, he's a game-changing type player, and if he's any bit as fast and as explosive as he was at Alabama, the Lions will find ways to just give him the ball in space, and he'll again be playing from behind a lot of games. They'll be trying to give him touches to kind of help him get comfortable, get acclimated to the league. So he's a guy to look for late. Other than those receivers, maybe Cook in Buffalo as a running back as another rookie. I know he's going to share time with some other guys there, but from what I'm hearing around camp, he's showing signs to be similar to Dalvin Cook, his older brother. Kind of a guy to keep your eye on. I don't know how much Buffalo's going to run the ball. They haven't been great at it the last few years. Josh Allen takes some of those he gets some decent amount of rushes. So he's a guy to
Yeah.
keep on the radar, though. Besides
They
that,
want to look out for the safety of their quarterback too. So I
sure.
think they're just looking for the right running back to start offloading some of those carries too.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think that's a big part of why they selected him when they did, because they
Yeah.
probably could have got him a little later in the draft as well, but they went for him, and I think they plan on using him. So those are honestly really the only rookies I would pay attention to this year. I would be careful drafting any other ones. You just don't know, right? And I would avoid rookies if you can, but if you're looking for a risky pick or a sleeper pick, a rookie is not always a terrible option.
Yeah. And in running back camp too, I also want to shout out Kenneth Walker, just because Seattle's, as we were discussing earlier in the episode, pretty deep into a rebuild. They don't know what they got in Drew Lock. Obviously, they do have some great receiver talent, but they also invested very heavily in their offensive line with this draft class. So, and Walker's a very dynamic player as a running
Yeah.
back too. He's very fast. He has great hands. So definitely, especially in PPR leagues, right? There's a good chance that not only he gets a decent amount of carries, but also, will probably be split out for some receptions as well. So I'd throw him. But yeah, I mean, as far as the rest of your analysis on rookies go, I'm right there with you. I'd say that all the guys you mentioned are probably the quote unquote safest rookie picks that you can make. You
Yeah.
already kind of know how they're going to fit in the scheme and all of that.
And of course, there's going to be someone I didn't name that has a crazy explosive year, and I'm going to look like an idiot. But it's hard to predict, right? It's hard to know how they're going to perform, how they're going to mesh with their new team, new quarterback, new whatever, right? While we're talking running backs, I'll go into another sleeper I had, not a rookie, but still a younger guy, Elijah Mitchell in San Francisco, I think, right? Like we talked about Debo and how he's going to definitely get his touches rushing and receiving. But I think you might want to look to see Elijah Mitchell is going to get a lot more carries this year. He struggled with his health last year, but if he remains healthy with the running scheme that the 49ers have, they're very, very good at it. And there's going to be a lot of eyes on Deebo Samuel and their other weapons. And they're going to want to take stress off Trey Lance if he's their guy. So look for him. I think he could have a huge year. He could be like a top 10 to even the top 8 or 7 running back this year if he's used the way I could see him being used. That's my sleeper there at running back. I don't know what you think about that.
I definitely agree, especially if Debo again is trying to sort of offload some of those carries, as far as just protecting himself and his own safety and his own, long-term health goes. The only other one that kind of comes to mind as we, have this conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think 2 weeks from now we'll be doing a much more fantasy focused. We might even do a mock draft episode, so be on the lookout for that. But I also think Tua might not be a horrible option just because of the re-up that they've had on offense. I definitely wouldn't draft him as your QB1, especially in a 10-man league. But, he kind of reminds me of I drafted Jameis Winston as my backup quarterback. And just the fact that he was, he had 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions before he got injured. He was playing very consistently. He was making sure the job was getting done with all of the talent he was surrounded by. I think Tua's in a very similar situation. Good organizational structure, lots of weapons to throw to. They kind of have a plan for him. I do expect him to be putting up at least better numbers than he has been the past 2 seasons.
Completely agree with you, man. He was my other quarterback besides Kirk that I would look at as a sleeper because it's his make or break year, and he has no excuses anymore. Got the weapons, got the defense, got the coaching staff. It's time to show what he can do, right? There's no more excuses for him. It's now or never. The last position I want to look at too for sleeper, or I guess 2 more would just be receiver and tight end. Real simple. I mean, I've talked about this in our last episode. Hunter Renfrow, Devontae Adams and Darren Waller are going to get a lot of attention, and he's going to get isolated on linebackers and safeties, and he is going to just dominate those matchups because he's unbelievably quick, unbelievably technically sound, great hands. He's a short route guy, but he can make big plays. Derek Carr loves him. he's a guy to look out for. And then at a new home for Robert Woods, and barring how he plays with his recovery process from his injury last year, another ACL guy. But if he's able to get back, and I've seen footage of him, he looks like he's getting close. He's another guy that could be really good in a new home with a new team and could possibly be a wide receiver one there. And then at tight end, I have Dawson Knox. I've said this before, I think in our player rankings a few episodes back. Dawson Knox with Josh Allen, with what they're trying to do, their connection. I think it's going to be something special in Buffalo this year. They like to throw the ball around. He's one of their best weapons. Stephon Diggs gets a lot of attention. Same reason as Renfro in the matchups. Like Dawson Knox is going to be on backers and safeties, and he's going to win those matchups a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And tight end is always just a super tough position in fantasy. At least to me, like that was the position I struggled with the most season over season, because it's similar to running backs where like there's 3 or 4 guys are going to be good, solid guys, put up consistent numbers. Then the talent drop off is just plummets after that. And, you're struggling to find somebody that can even put up consistent numbers, right?
There's definitely the biggest drop off. I agree with you, is tight end. I mean, there's literally 3 or 4 every year that get picked in the top 5 rounds, and then the rest is just like a scrap for guys like Dawson Knox, who I actually think is going to be one of those top 3 guys this year, but he's probably going to fall in those drafts to 6th, 7th round, and it's because he's just not one of the top 3 guys on projection.
Yeah, definitely. And I look for consistency over everything. Like I just want a reliable, 10 points or whatever every week. It drives me nuts when guys are just all over the place. So
John, last year, just to highlight that of how miserable that is, Darren Waller, I picked him pretty early, and I was so happy with it. And the first game, he had like 20 targets and had 18 catches. It was ridiculous. And I'm like, if this is any bit of how they're going to use him this year, I'm okay. He did not have another game over like 12 points for the next 8 weeks. I mean, he was getting like 3 targets a game, and just I mean, he went from literally getting the ball thrown to him 20 times in one game in the week 1 to just like maybe 20 times over the next 5 games total. I was like, what is happening, right? So that's the type of stuff that you don't know how to prepare for, that you can get screwed over in your drafting. And tight end's the hardest thing, because Darren Waller was projected like the 2nd best tight end last year. So it's one of those things. It's hard to prepare for.
In the interest of time, and also just content for this next episode, I think we'll kind of wrap it up around here. But again, we're probably going to do just a fully fantasy focused episode, dropping right in time for all of you guys to kind of pick out some ideas or some inspiration for your drafts coming up. So looking forward to that one. Preparing for that one should be fun. Just nerding out all over that stuff. The statistics surrounding fantasy is a good time. So
and again, John and I, we do our own thing, right? This isn't going to be like your ESPN generic. Like, we do our own stuff. Like, we have our own research, our own ways of drafting. We'll go over draft strategies. A lot of people are looking at drafting receivers early over running backs, even if you have top picks. So we'll talk about all that stuff in this next episode. John and I are excited about it.
Happy the brief hiatus is over, and definitely looking forward to getting more consistent as we go into the season here. So we'll see everybody next time.